Welcome to Treated Table. I am your host, Sarah Gollibart-Gorman. Today we're in BMC Bake's Harrisburg's gluten-free bakery, and we're making a peach salsa. Now, peach salsa often gets a bad rap because frankly, it's often too sweet. But this recipe has 0 added sugar. The sweetness is gonna come right from our yellow peaches from Shenandoah Valley orchards. These yellow peaches are great for fresh eating, canning, baking, and they're gonna really shine in this salsa. All of our ingredients are gonna get nicely charred before we chop them all up and add them to our bowl. Let's prep our baking sheets for broiling. So each baking sheet is getting a layer of parchment paper, and then we're going to halve everything and lay it out on the baking sheet, starting with our peaches. So early in the season, we're still working with cling peaches, so I'm gonna cut around the pit. I'm gonna lay these onto my baking sheet with the skin side up. And for the bits that are around the pit, that's okay if they're irregular shapes and sizes. Next, we're gonna have our tomatoes. I really want to emphasize the benefits of sourcing your tomatoes from the farmer's market. These are vine ripened, meaning that the flavor is going to be just so much more intense. These are going to be juicy and delicious. And so I encourage you for this recipe to find some tomatoes at your local farmer's market. We're going to cut out the core first before we have these big boys. Okay, we're going to cut them in half. And similar to the peach, just lay those down, cut side down on our baking sheet. Next we have tomatillos. Even though this looks like a tomato, it's very different. It actually has a really tart, citrusy flavor and is really gonna pair well with our peaches. These are very typical in Mexican cooking. So we're gonna cut out the pit as well. We're gonna have this and add it to the baking sheet again, cut side down. Or tomatillos have a husk, so make sure to remove the husk before continuing your preparations. I like to use a serrated knife when working with softer fruits and vegetables like tomatoes and tomatillos because the serrated edge just cuts a little bit better. We're gonna use white onions in this recipe, which are different from yellow onions because they're much milder and more sweet, and they're more typical in Mexican cooking. So for these, just cut off the bottom roots and the top. And then we're gonna have just like the other items. So the onions are gonna take a little bit longer to cook than our tomatoes and peaches, so we're gonna put those on a separate baking sheet. All right, next is our jalapeno. If you are afraid of spice, do not fear. I'm gonna show you a way to cut a jalapeno to avoid any of that spiciness. And if you are a heat lover, then ignore what I'm saying and include the whole dang thing. So in the middle of the pepper is the pith and the seeds. I'll show you what that looks like. So the pith and the seeds is what contains capsaicin, which is the spicy element in peppers. So if you want to avoid the spiciness, just simply cut around the pepper like this, leaving the pith still attached to the stem. And what you get are these strips of jalapeno that still have a little bit of kick, but not the intense spiciness that they would otherwise. So once you have these slices, you're going to lay those cut side down on the same baking sheet as the onions, because those are going to take a little bit longer to cook as well. We also have a head of garlic. We're going to use the whole head of garlic. So we're going to have this as well. And this time we're going to put these cut side up because I want the garlic bits to get nice and charred. Our next ingredient are nopales. These are a Mexican cactus that are eaten juiced, fresh, sauteed, grilled, however you might think. And these are gonna really work well in our salsa, but they have a specific way that they need to be prepared. So they are a cactus, so they have spines on them. So what I'm gonna do is I'm gonna use this vegetable peeler just to kind of brush along the exterior of the cactus to remove those dark spots that you see that contain the spines. I'm going to use a vegetable peeler just to run along each side of the cactus to remove those dark spots that contain the spines of the cactus. Make sure that you don't completely peel it because the skin is really delicious. So you want to do a pass on each side of the cactus. And then you're going to use your knife to remove the bottom of the cactus about a ½ inch. And then along the outside, you're going to remove about a ¼ inch. There are some really stubborn spines that hang out on the edges of these cacti. And so by cutting this, you're just removing those. Beautiful. Okay. Okay, now this is ready for our baking sheet. This is going to go on the same sheet as the onions, garlic, and jalapenos. So we're going to broil everything on high for about 10 minutes, and we're going to rotate the pans halfway through to make sure everything gets nice and evenly charred. When you're broiling, you want to make sure that you move your oven rack to the topmost area of your oven so everything's sitting right below the heating element. This process also works great on your grill, but instead of everything being cut side down, you would go cut side up so everything gets nicely charred. So next we're gonna juice our lime. So before I juice a lime, I like to roll it out on the countertop. 1, because you get a hand massage, but 2, because you're breaking up all of those little juicy cells inside the lime. It's gonna make it so much easier to juice. So once you've given it a good roll and you notice that it feels considerably softer, you're gonna cut it in half. And then juice it. So I have this kind of hand juicer, but some folks have like the kind that you squeeze. Whatever works best for you and your kitchen is what I recommend. As you're juicing the lime, you'll notice that the pulp is hanging out on the top of the juicer. I like to reincorporate this with the juice because we are wasting nothing here. We're using every bit in our salsa. Now that all our ingredients are nicely charred, we're gonna chop everything up and mix it into our salsa. So this process is super juicy. As you're chopping everything up, you don't need to be making any sort of uniform cuts. Things can be pretty rough, just as long as they're in nice bite-sized pieces, and you can customize it for however chunky you like your salsa. I like to use the dull side of my knife to scoop everything in to the salsa bowl to capture all those juices. I don't want to use the sharp side of my knife because that's going to scrape some of the wood off the cutting board. I don't want any wood in my salsa. So what we're basically making is a version of salsa macheteada, which basically means salsa that's been chopped with a machete. This is not a machete, it's just a normal kitchen knife. But traditional salsa macheteada is made by using 2 machetes and just chopping everything up. I wish I had that skill, but unfortunately, I don't. When you're cutting the nopales, you can put them on top of each other and kind of cut them up at the same time. And again, we're going for some chaotic cuts here. Because again, this salsa does not require uniform cuts. As long as everything is bite-sized, then you're good to go. So since everything is nice and charred in this salsa, it's really gonna give it a great smoky flavor. So it's going to taste like it came off the grill, even though it was just in my oven. So with this recipe, you do not need to peel your peaches. I encourage you to leave the peels on because that charred flavor is really going to add to our salsa. And again, I'm scraping with the dull side of my knife into the bowl. So I'm not scraping any of the wood off the cutting board, but I'm still getting all of those juices into my bowl there. The tomatillos are super soft and fragile at this point. So you can kind of use your knife It's kind of a little spatula to scoop everything up. And then chop away. So onions contain a lot of water, which is why they require a little extra time in the oven to get that nice char and to soften up. Just smell that sweet oniony goodness. Because again, our white onions have a sweeter flavor than their yellow counterpart, which is way more intense. We're gonna give everything a nice stir. I'm seeing beautiful reds and greens. This is a gorgeous salsa. Not only tastes good, but it's beautiful. Once we're nicely stirred, we're gonna add in the juice of 1 lime and 2 teaspoons of salt. We're gonna stir this up and taste it and see if we need to adjust our seasonings at all. Because oftentimes recipes will say, you know, 1 teaspoon of salt, 1.5 teaspoons of salt, but sometimes it comes down to preference and also the size of the ingredients that you're working with. Because no 2 tomatoes and no 2 peaches are the same size, so sometimes you have more volume and need some more salt for your seasoning. Let's give it a try. Subtly peachy, sweet, not spicy. That charred smokiness is so good. That lime is punching through, giving a nice bright kick. It's delicious. I don't think we need to add a thing. Our peach salsa is ready for our tacos. Now that we've made our salsa, we're gonna move on to the marinade for our chipotle peach pulled chicken. So our first step is to make a spice paste with cumin seed, Mexican oregano, cinnamon, paprika, and a whole head of garlic. What makes Mexican oregano different from Mediterranean oregano is that it's part of the verbena family, which is similar to lemon verbena, if you're familiar with that herb. So Mexican oregano is gonna have citrusy notes, floral notes, while its cousin, Mediterranean oregano, is sweeter with kind of bitter and peppery notes. You can find Mexican oregano at your local Latino grocery store. So I'm going to peel these garlic cloves and toss them into my blender. You can also use a food processor for this, or if you're really going for it, a mortar and pestle. When you're peeling an entire head of garlic, it works well just to kind of chop off the top, and then you can more easily just peel off all of those outer layers. And we're also working with fresh, uncured garlic. So oftentimes the garlic that you'll see in the grocery store has been cured or left to dry and develop that papery husk. So this has not been cured, meaning that it is totally fresh, like probably out of the field in like a matter of days ago. And so it's just gonna have a very fresh, garlicky flavor and be a little bit more mild. I'm gonna put all my garlic into my blender cup here. I'm gonna add a half teaspoon of cinnamon here, which is gonna provide a great warmth to contrast our peaches and smoky chipotles. We're gonna do 2 tablespoons of Mexican oregano, 1 tablespoon of whole cumin seed. I like to use whole spices whenever I can because the flavor is just so much better. And 2 teaspoons of paprika. So paprika is not gonna provide any heat despite its color. It's gonna provide a great earthiness to this marinade. Now that all the spices are in the blender cup, we're gonna pulse them until a chunky paste forms. And so since we're working with just garlic and spices, you're gonna need to kind of pop it off every once in a while and give it a good shake to make sure everything is evenly incorporated. Maybe 1 more pulse. Awesome. Awesome. So we're gonna fry these spices now as the base for our marinade. So why fry spices? So this is a process that's very typical in Indian cooking. And what it does is that it really deepens the flavor and unlocks all of the fat-soluble flavor compounds in all of these spices. So when we put in our olive oil and we use that to fry the spices, all of those flavor compounds are going to be imparted into the olive oil, which will just spread throughout our dish. We're gonna fry this on medium-high heat for about 2 to 3 minutes until everything is really fragrant and getting brown. And the scent here, y'all, is super fruity, which you'd never think having garlic and all these spices in there, but it's really quite delicious smelling. Let's fry these spices up. Now that our spices are nice and fried, I'm gonna deglaze the pan with a cup of water. What I mean by deglazing is that during that frying process, lots of spice bits got stuck to the bottom of the pan. So when I pour in that cup of water and give it a good stir and scrape on the stove, it loosens up all those spice bits and incorporates everything to make sure that nothing is stuck to the bottom of the pan. So now that we're all deglazed, we're gonna add 2 peaches. I'm gonna dice everything up. It does not need to be super uniform and clean because we're gonna use an immersion blender to blend everything up anyways. Next, we're gonna add our chipotles and adobo. These are jalapenos that have been smoked, dried, and then marinated in a sweet and tangy sauce. So these are gonna add a nice smoky flavor to our marinade and also a little bit of heat. My dad would use these a ton in soups growing up, so the flavor is very dear to me. You can often find these in cans, like usually a 7-ounce can or a 12-ounce can, so you want to use between 6 and 7 ounces in this recipe. Okay, now that I have all my ingredients ready to go, we're gonna take this to the stovetop and bring it to a boil. We're gonna reduce that to a simmer for about 15 minutes until everything is nice and softened. We're gonna be stirring that occasionally. So everything is nice and softened, so now I'm gonna use my immersion blender to blend all the ingredients up together. Use the low setting on your immersion blender to avoid too much splashiness. You can also put all the ingredients into your blender or food processor if you prefer that method. Okay, everything's all blended up. Let's simmer this for 5 more minutes. We're gonna add the juice of 2 limes and 2 teaspoons of salt to our marinade. We're gonna let this cool before marinating our chicken. It's now time to marinate our chicken. I have a 4-pound bird here from Home Again Farms. I want like a 4 to 6 pound chicken because it has to be able to fit into my Dutch oven. So a 4 to 6 pound bird is gonna be just the right amount of size. Typically in farmers markets, chickens are sold whole. This recipe is a great way to use the whole chicken while also sourcing your meat locally. So there is no graceful way to do this. I have to transfer the chicken from the bag that it came in into the bag that I am marinating it in. So bear with me, y'all. This is not pretty, and we're gonna be handling the chicken, so it's all right. We're gonna roll with it. So I'm gonna lift the chicken out ever so gently, and if I get juices on the countertop, I'm gonna clean them up. It's gonna be okay. Look at this, the transfer. Can she do it? Oh my! Chicken champion right here. Okay, chicken's in the bag. Nasty bag is in the trash. Let's wash our hands real quick. Now we're gonna transfer the marinade into the bag with the chicken. And also for this whole process, it's really helpful to have a bowl, like right here, about the size of the chicken, so that it's gonna support it and keep it mostly upright as I'm doing this process. My marinade is all in the bag with the chicken. I'm going to seal it up. And now I have a mess-free way to give my chicken a little massage. Here we go, treating this chicken right. The chicken's all covered up. I'm gonna put it back into the bowl. You're gonna marinate your chicken for at least 30 minutes or at most overnight. If you're short on time, 30 minutes will do, but if you give it the full overnight treatment, all those flavors, those chipotle, peach, spicy yumminess is gonna seep into the chicken and the flavor is gonna be amazing. So if you have time, try for the overnight marinade. To the fridge we go. When I'm ready to bake my chicken, first I'm gonna preheat the oven to 250 degrees. While it's preheating, I'm gonna cut up an onion crosswise. I don't want the chicken to be just resting on the bottom of the Dutch oven because it could get kind of soggy. Our chicken's been marinating for about an hour. Time to go into the Dutch oven. So what you're gonna do is just open up your bag and then you're gonna plop your chicken in breast side down. By having your chicken breast side down in your Dutch oven, that allows that white meat to stay juicy. So just slide it right in. I'm gonna use my spatula to kind of spread the sauce around the chicken and make sure it's kind of centered in there in the Dutch oven. Cover it up and bake for about 4 hours at 250 or until the chicken is falling off the bone. So the oven we go. All right, our chicken is done cooking. It's time to shred. You have some options for shredding the chicken. You can shred it right in the Dutch oven or transfer it to a cutting board, whatever works best for you. When I shred the chicken, I'm gonna use my forks to just kind of shred the meat, pulling apart. I'm gonna pull out the bones as I go. Shredding in the cast iron is definitely a cleaner process. It's less of a mess. The cutting board makes it easier to get those nooks and crannies, so really it's up to you. Whatever works best for you and your kitchen. Now it's time to enjoy the fruits of our labor. We have our amazing peach salsa, our smoky chipotle peach chicken. Let's put them together in some tacos. Our tortillas are from Doña Fer, which is a tortilleria here in Harrisonburg. I really recommend, if you have access to this, to get some fresh tortillas because it makes all the difference. Now we're gonna add our shredded chicken to the tortillas. Next is our peach salsa. So a dollop on each taco here, showcasing all of those beautiful colors and flavors. Awesome. Now we're gonna add a sprinkle of this queso fresco. And a sprinkle of cilantro. And finally, a squeeze of fresh lime juice. Okay, our tacos are now ready to enjoy. This meal is great for a summer evening on the patio, on the deck, gathering with family. This meal serves a crowd, so don't be afraid to have a taco party. Let's give it a try. The Shenandoah Valley Orchard's peach is shining through, everybody. Wow, that was so delicious. Stay tuned to see what we're cooking up next in the kitchen with Shenandoah Valley Orchards.